The morning air still held the memory of dawn when Father announced we would be attending the county fair. His words hung in the kitchen like the dust motes that danced in shafts of light through our windows. I kept my eyes fixed on my bowl of oatmeal, afraid my face might betray the sudden quickening of my heart. "Eli will come with us," he said, nodding in my direction. "It's time he sees more of what lies beyond our fields." My brother Samuel shot me a sideways glance, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. At 22, I was 2 years his junior but had traveled far less. While he occasionally ventured into town for supplies with Father, I remained behind, tending to the livestock, the endless rows of corn, the rhythm of life that had defined my existence since birth. "Danke, Father," I murmured, the Pennsylvania Dutch blending with English as it often did in our home. That night, I lay awake in bed longer than usual, staring at the moon-washed ceiling. The county fair was something I'd only heard described in fragments. The noise, the crowds, the English with their strange clothes and stranger ways. I had been taught to avoid such worldly gatherings, to find contentment in the quiet ways of our people. Yet somewhere beneath my woolen blanket, a small flame of curiosity burned. The fairground sprawled across the valley like a carnival kingdom. From the back of our buggy, I watched it materialize, a riot of colors against the muted landscape. Red and white striped tents, yellow banners snapping in the breeze, strings of electric lights that would glow like fallen stars come nightfall. My palms grew damp against the rough fabric of my black trousers. "Stay close to the family," Father reminded me as our horse slowed near the entrance. His voice was gentle but firm. "We are here to sell, not to be taken in by worldly things." I nodded, helping Mother unload her quilts and preserves for our modest booth. The fair was one of the few times our community engaged with the outside world, exchanging our crafts for the money needed to sustain our simple lives. While other Amish families sold furniture or baked goods, Mother's raspberry jam and intricate quilts were our offering. "You may walk about once we're settled," Mother said softly, surprising me. "But be back before midday meal." Freedom, even this small taste of it, felt foreign on my tongue. I moved through the fairgrounds like a ghost, both present and apart. My plain clothes marked me immediately as Amish among the sea of denim and bright colors. Some visitors stared curiously, others nodded respectfully. Most simply flowed around me like water around a stone in a stream. The quilting pavilion felt safe, familiar patterns stitched by hands not unlike my mother's. I lingered there, admiring the precise geometric designs of the Amish quilts beside the more elaborate English ones, with their pictorial scenes and curving shapes. But it was the music that drew me outward, notes carried on the breeze like dandelion seeds. Not the solemn hymns of our Sunday gatherings, but something light and wistful, a painted carousel turning slowly, children's laughter rising and falling with the wooden horses. I stood at a distance, watching the machinery of joy spin before me. It was there, lost in contemplation, that I first noticed him. He stood beneath a canopy of string lights that swayed gently in the morning breeze, though they were unlit in the daylight. Canvases of all sizes surrounded him, explosions of color and movement that made my breath catch. But it was the man himself who held my gaze. Dark hair tied loosely at the nape of his neck, falling in waves past his shoulders. Hands stained with a rainbow of pigments. A smile that seemed to hold the warmth of August sunshine. I didn't realize I had stopped walking until someone bumped against my shoulder, muttering an apology as they passed. My feet had rooted to the dusty ground, my eyes unable to look away from the tableau before me. The artist, for that's what he must be, laughed at something a customer said, and the sound traveled across the space between us like ripples across still water. Deep and melodious. Free in a way I had never allowed myself to be. "You like art?" I startled, realizing he was looking directly at me now, his head tilted in question. Heat rushed to my face, and I glanced down at my boots, suddenly aware of how plain they were, how plain I was, in this explosion of color and life. Words failed me. In truth, I knew little of art beyond the practical crafts of our community. The decorative was discouraged as prideful. Beauty existed in simplicity and function. Something in my hesitation seemed to intrigue him. He set down his paintbrush and wiped his hands on a cloth already stained with a dozen colors. "Come closer," he called. "I won't bite." My legs moved of their own accord, carrying me into the orbit of his small tent. Up close, his paintings were even more striking. Landscapes that seemed to breathe, portraits with eyes that followed me, abstract swirls that somehow captured emotions I had no names for. "I'm Jack," he said, extending a hand streaked with blue at the knuckles. I stared at it for a moment before remembering to respond. "Eli," I said quietly, taking his hand briefly. His skin was warm, his grip firm but gentle. "Eli," he repeated, as if tasting my name. Strong name. Biblical. I nodded, surprised he would know this. "It means ascended or uplifted." Jack smiled, revealing a small gap between his front teeth that somehow made his face even more compelling. "Well, Eli the Ascended, what brings you to my humble gallery today?" There was no mockery in his tone, only genuine curiosity and perhaps a hint of playfulness that made my chest tighten inexplicably. "I've never seen paintings like these," I admitted, gesturing to the canvas nearest me. A sunset that seemed to have captured not just the colors, but the feeling of day's end. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all day." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. They were hazel, I noticed, green and brown and gold, all swirled together like the pigments on his palette. "Most people just ask how much." A young couple approached the tent, and Jack held up one finger to me in a gesture I understood meant wait. I watched as he engaged with them, describing the inspiration behind a painting of a thunderstorm over a field. His hands moved as he spoke, painting the scene again in the air between them. I should have returned to my family's booth, the weight of my father's expectations pressed against my shoulders. Yet I remained, studying not just the art but the artist, the way sunlight caught in his hair, the easy confidence in his stance, the passion in his voice when he spoke of light and shadow. When the couple moved on without purchasing, Jack returned his attention to me. "You're Amish, right?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes." I resisted the urge to adjust my straw hat or smooth my simple clothing. "I've always admired the Amish commitment to craft," he said, surprising me again. "Everything made with intention and care, nothing wasteful or meaningless." His observation cut closer to the heart of our ways than most outsiders ever ventured. I found myself warming to him despite the voice in my head that whispered caution. "Would you let me draw you?" The question was sudden, direct. "Draw me?" I echoed, confusion surely evident on my face. Jack nodded, already reaching for a leather-bound sketchbook and a stick of charcoal. "Your face has incredible structure, the kind artists dream about. Strong lines, thoughtful eyes." He gestured to a wooden stool beside his table. "Just sit there. 10 minutes, that's all." Every teaching I had received warned against vanity, against placing importance on one's appearance or allowing oneself to become an object of attention. Yet I found myself moving toward the stool, drawn by something in his gaze that made me feel seen in a way I never had been before. "I shouldn't," I said, even as I sat down. "Sometimes the things we shouldn't do are exactly the things that help us understand who we are." Jack replied, his voice softer now. He positioned himself across from me, sketchbook balanced on his knee. "Look slightly to your left," he instructed, "and try to relax. Breathe." I did as he asked, fixing my gaze on a distant food stand, while acutely aware of his eyes studying my face. The scratch of charcoal against paper filled the space between us. Occasionally, he would murmur something to himself, too quiet for me to hear. "What made you become an artist?" I asked, desperate to fill the silence with something other than the sound of my thundering heart. Jack's hand never stopped moving across the page. "I didn't become one. I always was one. Just took me a while to admit it." He glanced up, his gaze intense. "Hold still, please." "Sorry." "Don't apologize." A small smile. "Being still doesn't come naturally to most of us. We're taught to always be moving, producing, achieving." The observation struck me as ironic, coming from someone outside my community. It was the English world that seemed obsessed with movement and progress, while we Amish valued stillness and tradition. In your world, perhaps, I ventured. Jack chuckled. Fair point. But I think humans are the same everywhere, caught between the desire to move and the longing to be still. His eyes met mine briefly. The trick is finding the balance. Something in his words resonated deep within me, a truth I had felt but never articulated. I lived in a world of necessary stillness, of traditions unchanged for generations. Yet inside me had always burned a quiet restlessness, a curiosity about what lay beyond our farm, beyond the boundaries of what I knew. Almost done, Jack said, his charcoal moving in quick, confident strokes now. You're a natural model, you know. Some people can't stop fidgeting or trying to pose. We're taught that vanity is a sin, I explained, to seek attention or admiration. There's a difference between vanity and simply acknowledging beauty where it exists, he countered. The sunset isn't vain for being beautiful. Neither is a well-made chair or a perfect apple. Or a man with hands stained with color and eyes like autumn, I thought, immediately startled by the direction of my mind. I shifted on the stool, suddenly uncomfortable. There, Jack announced, setting down his charcoal. Would you like to see? I hesitated, then nodded, standing to move behind him as he turned the sketchbook around. What I caught my breath in my throat. The face on the paper was undeniably mine. The straight nose, the serious set of my mouth, the way my hair curled slightly where it met my collar. But Jack had somehow captured something I had never seen in the occasional glimpses of my reflection in still water or window panes. A quiet intensity in the eyes, a hint of yearning in the gaze, a strength in the jaw that suggested determination rather than merely obedience. Is that really how I look? The question escaped before I could contain it. Jack studied me, then the drawing. It's how I see you. He carefully tore the page from his sketchbook and offered it to me. Here, a gift. Our hands brushed as the paper changed hands, and a current seemed to pass between us, subtle as a whisper, but undeniable. I pulled back quickly, clutching the drawing. Thank you, I managed, uncertain what else to say, how to express the tumult of emotions the simple interaction had stirred within me. Jack seemed about to speak when a woman's voice called from nearby. Jack, there you are! I've been looking everywhere! A young woman with short-cropped hair and multiple earrings approached, carrying a cardboard tray with 2 paper cups. She stopped when she saw me, her eyebrows lifting slightly. Making friends? She asked Jack, handing him one of the cups. Mia, this is Eli, Jack said. Eli, my friend Mia. She's helping me manage sales today. I nodded politely, acutely aware of how out of place I must appear to her. Nice to meet you, Mia said, her smile friendly if curious. She turned to Jack. The jewelry vendor wants to know if you'd swap one of your small landscapes for a silver pendant. Jack sighed. Tell her I'll come by later to look. He glanced at me apologetically. Business calls. I took this as my cue to leave, already having stayed far longer than I should have. I should return to my family, I said, carefully rolling the drawing and tucking it inside my vest. Thank you again. Wait, Jack said, reaching for a small card on his table. He scribbled something on the back before handing it to me. I'm here all week, if you come back. I accepted the card without looking at it, merely nodding before turning to make my way back through the fairgrounds. My heart was beating so rapidly, I feared it might be visible through my shirt, like a small bird trying to escape its cage. The din of the fair, laughter, music, the calls of vendors, faded to a distant hum as I walked, my mind replaying every moment of the encounter. The way Jack's eyes had studied my face, the casual confidence in his movements, the brush of his fingers against mine. What was happening to me? I returned to our booth just as Father was beginning to look concerned. No words were spoken about my absence, but I felt the weight of his gaze as I took my place beside the jars of preserves, arranging them in neat rows. Did you see much of the fair? Mother asked quietly as she folded a quilt a customer had examined but not purchased. Some, I replied, careful to keep my voice neutral. The quilting pavilion, the carousel. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my vague response. What would she think if she knew I had sat for a portrait? If she knew my heart still raced at the memory of a stranger's smile? Throughout the afternoon, I helped customers, made change, wrapped purchases in brown paper. All the while, the drawing seemed to burn against my chest where I had hidden it, a secret warming my skin. Twice I felt for the card Jack had given me, making sure it was still there, though I had not yet looked at what he had written. When evening approached and the fair began to transform under the glow of electric lights, Father announced it was time to pack our remaining goods. "We will return tomorrow," he said. "Samuel, help with the heavy crates." As we loaded our buggy, I caught sight of Jack's tent in the distance, now illuminated by the string lights that had been dark during the day. They cast a warm golden glow that seemed to hover around the space like fireflies. Jack moved about inside, rearranging canvases, his silhouette graceful and unhurried. "Eli," Samuel's voice broke through my thoughts. "The preserves." I turned back to my task, but something had shifted inside me. A door opened that I wasn't sure could ever be closed again. Later that night, in the privacy of the barn where I had gone to check on a pregnant mare, I finally examined the card Jack had given me. One side bore his name and the title Visual Artist, along with what I assumed was a telephone number, useless to me in our home without electricity or telephones. But on the back, in handwriting as expressive as his art, were words that made my breath catch. "Meet me behind the livestock barn tomorrow at sunset, if you can. I have more to show you." I traced the letters with my fingertip, reading them again and again until they blurred before my eyes. I should burn the card, forget the encounter, focus on the life laid out before me. Marriage to a girl from our community, children, tending the same fields my father and grandfather had tended. Instead, I tucked it carefully into a small space between boards in the barn wall, a hiding place I had used since childhood for treasures I couldn't explain even to myself. A particularly vibrant autumn leaf, a smooth stone from the creek bed, a feather from a blue jay. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed beneath my blankets, haunted by hazel eyes and paint-stained hands. The next day passed in a fog of anticipation and dread. Would I go? Could I? The consequences of such a meeting, discovered or not, weighed heavily on me. Yet as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, I found myself asking Father if I might walk the fairgrounds again. "Be back before dark," was all he said, not looking up from the ledger where he recorded our sales. The livestock barn stood at the far edge of the fairgrounds, its large doors open to allow air circulation for the animals inside. County children proudly displayed their prize pigs and goats, cows and rabbits. I moved through the space with purpose, fighting the tremor in my hands. Behind the barn was a small area where hay bales were stacked, hidden from the main pathways of the fair. Jack was already there when I arrived, sitting on one of the bales, sketching in his book. He looked up as I approached, and the smile that broke across his face made something twist painfully in my chest. "You came," he said, closing his sketchbook. "I wasn't sure you would." "I shouldn't be here," I replied honestly, remaining standing though he gestured to the hay bale beside him. "Probably not," he agreed, "but I'm glad you are." He patted the space again. "Please, sit. I promise I don't have ulterior motives." Except he did. He must. Why else invite me here, away from the crowds? Yet I found myself sitting beside him, leaving careful space between us. "I looked at your drawing again last night," I said, breaking the silence. "You're very talented." Jack smiled, pleased by the compliment. "Thank you. I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil. Drove my parents crazy. I'd cover every surface with scribbles." The image made me smile. A small, wild-haired boy leaving his mark on the world. "Were they artists too? Your parents?" He shook his head. "Dad's an accountant. Mom teaches second grade. Very practical people who somehow produced a dreamer." He stretched his legs out before him, canvas shoes bright against the straw-covered ground. "What about yours?" "My parents?" The question seemed odd. What was there to tell? "They're as our parents have always been. Father farms and tends livestock. Mother keeps our home, makes quilts and preserves." "And you'll do the same?" Jack asked. "Farm like your father?" I nodded. though something inside me ached at the simplicity of the answer. It's our way. Have you ever wanted something else? The directness of his question startled me. Among my people, such probings into another's contentment would be considered rude, potentially stirring discontent where acceptance should reign. It's not about what I want, I said finally. It's about what is right. Jack was quiet for a moment, considering this. And who decides what's right? God, I answered automatically, then added, as understood through our community, our elders. And if what you feel in your heart conflicts with what they tell you is right? His voice was gentle, not challenging, but genuinely curious. I looked down at my hands, clasped tightly in my lap. Then my heart is wrong. Jack sighed softly. That's a heavy burden to carry, Eli. Something in his tone made me look up, and I found him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Sadness mixed with something warmer. What about you? I asked, desperate to shift the focus away from myself. Is this your life, traveling to fairs, selling your art? A smile returned to his face. Part of it. I have a small studio in the city, Philadelphia. I teach classes twice a week, sell at galleries when I can. The fairs are supplemental income, plus I like meeting people outside the usual art crowd. He gestured around us. Different perspectives, you know? Philadelphia. The name itself conjured images of noise and crowds, endless buildings reaching toward the skein a world away from my quiet farm. What's it like? I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. Living in the city? Jack's expression grew thoughtful. Loud, fast, sometimes lonely, even surrounded by millions of people. He plucked a piece of straw from the bale, twirling it between his fingers. But also vibrant, full of possibilities. You can reinvent yourself there, become who you really are, rather than who you were born to be. And who are you really? The question emerged barely above a whisper. His eyes met mine, held them. Still figuring that out. But I know I'm someone who sees beauty in unexpected places. He reached out slowly, and I froze as his hand came toward my face. Gently, he tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushing my skin with a touch so light it might have been imagined. Someone who can't look away when that beauty is right in front of him. My breath caught, heart hammering against my ribs. No one had ever touched me with such tender intention, such care. And no man had ever looked at me the way Jack was looking at me now. As if I were something precious and rare. I should have moved away. Should have stood up and walked back to the safety of my family's booth, back to the clearly defined boundaries of my world. Instead, I remained still, caught in the gravity of this moment, this man. You're trembling, Jack observed, his hand falling away. I'm afraid, I admitted, the words barely audible. Of me? I shook my head. Of this. Of what I'm feeling. A look of understanding crossed his face, followed by a gentleness that made my chest ache. Eli! The sound of voices approaching cut him off. We both turned toward the noise, fair workers coming to collect more hay bales for an event. We should go, I said, standing quickly. Jack nodded, rising beside me. Come see the fair at night, he suggested. The Ferris wheel at dusk. There's nothing like it. I hesitated, knowing I should refuse, knowing I had already crossed lines I had never thought I would approach. But something in me had awakened, hungry for more of whatever this was. Where? I asked. Meet me at the base of the wheel at 8, he said. If you can. I nodded once, then turned and walked away, not looking back, though I could feel his eyes following me until I rounded the corner of the barn. I made excuses to my family, a desire to see how the English celebrated their evenings, a curiosity about the lights that transformed the fairgrounds after sunset. Father was reluctant but eventually consented when Mother intervened. Let the boy see a little of the world, she said quietly. He has a strong foundation. If only she knew how that foundation trembled beneath me now. The fair at night was a different creature altogether, magical and slightly dangerous. Colored lights cast shifting patterns across faces and pathways. Music seemed to emerge from everywhere at once, different melodies competing and occasionally finding unexpected harmony. The sense of fried dough and sugar mingled with the earthier smells of animals and hay. I moved through it all in a state of sensory overload, both overwhelmed and exhilarated. English teenagers passed in laughing groups, some holding hands, others with arms draped casually around each other's shoulders. Their ease with physical affection struck me, the casual touching that was so rare in my community, where even hugs were reserved for moments of great significance. The Ferris wheel dominated the skyline, its structure outlined in white lights that made it appear as though a giant, luminous spider had spun its web against the darkening sky. At its base stood Jack, hands in the pockets of his worn jeans, hair loose around his shoulders. He spotted me before I reached him, his face lighting up in a way that made my steps falter. What was I doing here? You made it, he said as I approached. I shouldn't stay long, I replied, glancing around nervously. If someone from my community sees me. Jack nodded, understanding. One ride, he promised. Then I'll let you go if that's what you want. If that's what you want. The phrase lingered as we joined the short line for the Ferris wheel. What did I want? I had never been encouraged to ask myself that question. When our turn came, Jack paid for both our tickets despite my protests. The operator opened the small door to a swinging car, and suddenly we were seated side by side, a metal bar lowered across our laps. The closeness was unavoidable, my shoulder pressed against his as the wheel jerked into motion, lifting us off the ground. I gripped the bar tightly, my knuckles white as we ascended into the evening sky. I had never been so high, never felt the strange weightlessness in my stomach as the ground fell away beneath us. Breathe, Jack reminded me gently, and I realized I had been holding my breath. Look. I followed his gaze outward as we reached the apex of the wheel. The fairground spread below us like a living tapestry, ribbons of light defining pathways, clusters of people moving like schools of fish, music rising in waves. Beyond lay the patchwork of fields and forests, and farther still, the distant glow of city lights on the horizon. It's beautiful, I whispered. This is what I try to capture in my paintings, Jack said. Not just how things look, but how they feel in moments like this. The wheel continued its rotation, bringing us down only to lift us again. With each circuit, I relaxed slightly, becoming accustomed to the height, to Jack's presence beside me. Can I ask you something? He said as we began our third revolution. I nodded, though anxiety flickered through me at what he might want to know. Have you ever been in love? The question was so unexpected it took my breath away. No, I answered honestly. I'm not yet baptized into the church. After that will come marriage, but it's not about love, Jack finished for me. It's about commitment to community. Love grows from shared values, shared work. I recited words I had heard all my life. Romantic love as the English understand it, it's unstable, based on feelings that change. Jack was quiet for a moment. You're not entirely wrong, he admitted. Love can be unstable. Feelings do change. He turned slightly to face me, our knees touching now. But when you feel it, really feel it, there's nothing in the world like it. It's terrifying and beautiful, and it makes everything else make sense. Have you? I asked, my voice barely audible above the creaking of the wheel and the distant music. Been in love? A sad smile touched his lips. Once. It ended badly. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me things. About myself, about what I'm looking for. His eyes held mine. About recognizing it when I might be finding it again. My heart stuttered in my chest. We had reached the top of the wheel again, the car swaying gently in the evening breeze. The entire world seemed suspended around us, waiting. Eli, Jack said softly. I've never met anyone like you. The way you see the world, with such clarity and honesty, it's beautiful. No one had ever spoken to me this way. No one had ever looked at me as Jack was looking at me now, as though I was something precious and rare. Confusion and longing warred within me, desire and fear tangled into a knot I couldn't unravel. I don't know what this is, I confessed, my voice breaking slightly. What I'm feeling, It's wrong, it must be, and yet... Does it feel wrong? Jack asked, his voice gentle. Here? He placed his hand over his heart. Or just here? He tapped his temple. I couldn't answer. How could I explain the lifetime of teachings that shaped my understanding of right and wrong? The clear boundaries that had always defined my world were blurring, and the vertigo I felt had nothing to do with our height above the ground. The wheel began its final descent, our conversation interrupted by the mechanical process of returning to Earth. As we exited the car, Jack placed his hand lightly on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd. That simple touch sent electricity through me, and I moved slightly away, overwhelmed by my body's response. We walked in silence toward the edge of the fairgrounds. The noise of the fair receded, replaced by the chirping of evening insects and the soft rustling of leaves in the night breeze. I knew I should return to my family, yet I followed Jack to a quiet spot behind a vendor's tent, where the shadows were deep and we were hidden from casual observation. Tomorrow is the last day of the fair, Jack said, his voice low. Will you come? I stared at the ground, unable to meet his gaze. My father expects me to help with the booth. After then, when it closes. I should have said no, should have thanked him for his kindness and walked away, back to the safety of my world with its clear expectations and defined boundaries. Instead, I found myself nodding, a single small movement that felt like leaping from a cliff. I'll try, I whispered. Relief and something warmer flooded Jack's expression. He stepped closer, reaching for my hand. I let him take it, his fingers curling around mine in the darkness. Eli, he murmured, I've never seen someone so beautiful in the way you see the world. My breath caught as he turned my hand over, pressing his thumb into my palm in a slow, deliberate gesture that sent waves of sensation up my arm. Then, maintaining eye contact, he lifted my hand toward his face and leaned forward as if to press his lips against my knuckles. Time seemed to stop, suspended between heartbeats. My lungs forgot how to draw air. The world narrowed to the warm pressure of his hand holding mine, the closeness of his face, the unspoken question in his eyes as they held mine in the dim light. What would happen if I let him continue? What line would be crossed that could never be uncrossed? What part of myself would change irrevocably? And did I want it to? In that suspended moment, with Jack's lips hovering above my knuckles, my heartbeat thundered in my ears. The fair lights blurred around us, and I felt myself sway slightly, caught between desire and terror. Jack must have sensed my hesitation. He lowered my hand, but didn't release it, his thumb still tracing gentle circles on my palm. I'm sorry, he murmured. I shouldn't push. I shook my head, unable to form words that could capture the storm inside me. How could I explain that it wasn't him pushing, but something in me pulling, yearning toward him with a force I'd never experienced before? I should go, I whispered, gently withdrawing my hand, though every fiber of my being protested the separation. My family will worry. Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. Tomorrow, he said softly. It wasn't a question anymore, but a promise hanging between us. Tomorrow, I echoed, the word feeling like both salvation and damnation on my tongue. He stepped back, creating space between us that felt vast and cold. The meadow beyond the livestock area, at sunrise, before the fair opens. I nodded once, then turned and walked away, my steps quickening as distance grew between us. The weight of what I had just agreed to pressed against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. What was I doing? What madness had taken hold of me? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jack's face illuminated by the Ferris wheel lights, felt the phantom pressure of his thumb against my palm. The simple intimacy of that touch had awakened something in me that I had spent years carefully suppressing. A longing so profound it threatened to consume me. In the darkness of our shared bedroom, I could hear Samuel's steady breathing from the bed across from mine. My brother, so secure in his place in our world, so certain of the path laid out before him. Would he understand the tempest in my heart? Or would he look at me with the disappointment and judgment I feared from everyone I loved? When the first gray light of dawn crept through our small window, I was already dressed. I moved silently through our sleeping house, pausing only to leave a note explaining I had gone to check on the animals and would meet them at the fair. Outside, the world was shrouded in mist, the familiar landscape of our farm transformed into something dreamlike and uncertain. The dew-soaked grass dampened the hems of my trousers as I made my way toward the pasture that bordered the fairgrounds. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain it would wake the entire household. The meadow Jack had mentioned lay just beyond our property line, a neutral space between the orderly rows of our farm and the temporary chaos of the fairgrounds. As I approached, I saw him already there, a solitary figure seated on a large rock, his back to me. The rising sun caught in his dark hair, surrounding him with a halo of golden light that made him appear almost otherworldly. For a moment, I stood at the edge of the pasture, watching him. He was sketching something, his hand moving in quick, confident strokes across a small pad. I could turn back now, I thought. Return to my chores, to the life that had been planned for me since birth. No one would ever know of these stolen moments, these forbidden feelings. But even as the thought formed, my feet carried me forward, drawn to him as inevitably as tied to shore. He turned at the sound of my approach, and the smile that broke across his face made my heart stutter. He looked tired, dark circles beneath his eyes, suggesting he too had spent the night wrestling with sleeplessness, yet there was a brightness to him that seemed to push back the morning mist. "You came," he said, wonder in his voice. "I said I would," I replied, stopping a few feet from him, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands, my body. Jack patted the space beside him on the wide, flat rock. "Join me? I'm trying to capture the sunrise." I hesitated only briefly before sitting beside him, careful to maintain a small distance between us. The rock was cool beneath me, still holding the night's chill. "See how the light breaks through the mist?" Jack said, pointing toward the horizon where the sun was emerging between the trees. "It's like the world is being created anew each morning." I followed his gaze, seeing the landscape through his artist's eyes, the way the golden light spilled across the dew-drenched fields, how it caught in the lingering mist to create ephemeral pillars of gold and silver. "It's beautiful," I agreed softly. "Watch," Jack murmured, turning back to his sketch pad. With a few deft strokes, he captured the essence of the sunrise, not just the visual reality of it, but somehow the feeling of dawn breaking, of possibilities unfolding. I leaned closer, drawn by the magic emerging from his hands. "How do you do that?" I asked, genuine wonder in my voice. "Make it feel so real with just a few lines?" Jack smiled, pleased by my question. "It's about finding the heart of what you're seeing, not copying every detail, but capturing what moves you about it." He tore the sketch from his pad and offered it to me. "For you." Our fingers brushed as I accepted the drawing, and this time, I didn't pull away from the contact. Instead, I let my hand rest against his for a moment longer than necessary, savoring the warmth of his skin against mine. "Thank you," I said, carefully folding the sketch and tucking it into my shirt pocket, close to my heart. "No one has ever given me gifts like this." Jack studied me, his head tilted slightly. "What do you mean?" I gestured vaguely. "Things of beauty, things without practical purpose." I looked down at my hands, calloused from farm work. "In my world, everything must have function. Beauty for its own sake is considered prideful." "That sounds limiting," Jack observed, his voice gentle, free of judgment. "It is," I admitted, the words emerging before I could stop them. "Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating, like there's a whole world of color and light just beyond my reach." I swallowed hard, shocked by my own honesty. "I don't belong there. I know that, but I can't." My voice broke slightly. "I can't stop thinking about you, about the way you see things, about the possibility of more." The confession hung in the air between us, raw and vulnerable. I couldn't look at him, afraid of what I might see in his eyes. Then his hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. "Eli," he said softly, "look at me." Slowly, I raised my eyes to meet his gaze. What I saw there wasn't pity or confusion, but a reflection of my own longing, my own uncertainty. I haven't stopped thinking about you either, Jack confessed. Since the moment you walked by my tent, there's something about you that pulled me in immediately. Something real and genuine in a world that often feels artificial. His words washed over me like a warm tide, both comforting and terrifying. What is this? I whispered. What are we doing? Jack squeezed my hand gently. Getting to know each other, exploring a connection neither of us expected. It can't go anywhere, I said, the reality of our situation pressing in despite the magic of the moment. My life is here. The path before me is clear. Is it the path you want? Jack asked, his voice soft but direct. The question struck me with the force of a physical blow. Want. Such a simple word, yet so foreign to my way of thinking. My life had never been about what I wanted, but about what was expected, what was right according to the teachings of my community. I've always followed the rules, I said finally, my voice barely audible above the morning birdsong. I've never questioned the path laid out for me, but with you... I met his gaze again, finding courage in the warmth I saw there. With you, I don't know if I can. Jack was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of my hand. I'm not asking you to abandon your life, Eli. I would never put that burden on you. Then what are you asking? The question emerged more desperately than I had intended. For this moment, he replied simply, and maybe for another after it. Nothing more than you're willing to give. The sincerity in his voice undid me. Here was someone seeing me, truly seeing me, perhaps for the first time in my life. Not as a dutiful son, a future husband and father, a member of the community, but as Eli, a person with dreams and desires of my own. I don't know how to do this, I admitted, gesturing between us with my free hand. Any of this. A small smile touched Jack's lips. Neither do I. Not really. We make it up as we go. The simplicity of his answer, the gentle humor in it, eased something tight in my chest. I found myself smiling back, a genuine smile that felt foreign on my face after days of internal struggle. The morning light had strengthened, the mist beginning to burn away under the rising sun. Soon, I would need to return home, help with chores, prepare for our final day at the fair. The real world waited, inexorable and demanding. But in this moment, there was only the two of us, perched on a sun-warmed rock in a meadow that seemed to exist outside of time. Eli, Jack said, his voice low and serious now. May I? He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. Would it be all right if I kissed you? The question sent a shockwave through me. Even though some part of me had been anticipating, perhaps even hoping for this, hearing it spoken aloud made it suddenly, terrifyingly real. I should have said no, should have stood up and walked away, back to the safety and certainty of my life. Instead, I found myself nodding, a small, almost imperceptible movement that nonetheless changed everything. Jack moved slowly, giving me every opportunity to withdraw. His hand came up to cup my cheek. His touch feather-light against my skin. I closed my eyes, trembling slightly as he leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. When his mouth finally met mine, it was gentle. A question more than a demand. For a heartbeat, I remained frozen, overwhelmed by sensation and meaning. Then something broke loose inside me, and I was kissing him back, my hand reaching up to rest tentatively on his shoulder. The world fell away, the farm, the fair, the weight of expectation, the fear of judgment. There was only this, the soft pressure of his lips against mine, the warmth of his hand on my face, the thundering of my heart against my ribs. When we finally parted, I felt dizzy, transformed. Jack rested his forehead against mine, his eyes still closed, his breathing as unsteady as my own. Eli, he whispered, my name a prayer on his lips. I couldn't speak, couldn't find words to contain the vastness of what I was feeling. Joy and terror, exhilaration and shame, freedom and guilt, all tangled together in a knot I couldn't begin to unravel. Jack drew back slightly, his eyes searching mine. Are you okay? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I don't know, I answered honestly. I've never... That was my first. Understanding dawned in his expression. Your first kiss, he finished for me. I nodded, heat rising to my face. We're taught to save such things for marriage. Jack's thumb stroked gently across my cheekbone. I'm honored, he said simply, no trace of mockery in his voice. The sincerity in his words eased some of the turmoil within me. I leaned into his touch, allowing myself this moment of connection, of acceptance. I should go, I said reluctantly, aware of the time passing, of chores waiting, of a family that would soon wonder at my absence. There's work before we go to the fair. Jack nodded, understanding but clearly as reluctant as I was to end our time together. Will I see you there? At the fair? Yes, I promised. I'll find a way to come to your tent. He smiled, the expression lighting his entire face. I'll be counting the minutes. As I stood to leave, Jack caught my hand once more, pressing a soft kiss to my palm that sent shivers up my arm. Thank you for trusting me with this, he said quietly. With yourself. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Then I turned and made my way back across the meadow toward home, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my mind spinning with possibilities and fears. The day passed in a blur of chores and preparations. We loaded our remaining preserves and quilts into the buggy, the familiar rhythm of the work a stark contrast to the upheaval in my heart. Father noticed my distraction but attributed it to fatigue after several long days at the fair. You'll rest tomorrow, he said as we harnessed the horse. No field work, just tending to the animals. I nodded, guilt twisting in my stomach at his consideration, at the way he misunderstood the source of my preoccupation. At the fairgrounds, I helped set up our booth with mechanical efficiency, my body going through the motions while my mind wandered repeatedly to Jack, to the meadow, to the feel of his lips against mine. Every few minutes I found myself glancing toward the section where the artists had their tents, hoping for a glimpse of him. Eli, Mother's voice broke through my thoughts. Would you like to walk about for a while? We can manage here. I tried to hide my eagerness as I nodded. If you're sure. Go, she said with a small smile. Enjoy the last day of the fair. I moved through the fairgrounds with purpose, my heart beating faster with each step that brought me closer to Jack's tent. When I rounded the corner and saw him there, arranging his paintings, the world seemed to brighten, colors intensifying, sounds clarifying. He looked up as if sensing my presence, and the smile that broke across his face made my breath catch. He excused himself from a potential customer and moved toward me, stopping at a respectable distance, though his eyes held the memory of our morning together. You came, he said, echoing his words from the meadow. I said I would, I replied, the exchange already feeling like a ritual between us, a private language. Jack glanced around, noting the crowd. Walk with me, I need to deliver a painting to the other side of the fair. I nodded, falling into step beside him as he carefully lifted a wrapped canvas. We moved through the fairground side by side, not touching, but acutely aware of each other's presence. I've been thinking, Jack said as we navigated the crowded pathways. About what you said this morning, about not belonging. I tensed slightly, glancing around to ensure no one from my community was within earshot. I feel that way too sometimes, he continued, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Like I'm caught between worlds, not fully part of either. This surprised me. But you seem so confident, so certain of your place. Jack's laugh was soft, tinged with melancholy. It's an act, mostly. The truth is, I've never quite fit the mold my parents had in mind, nor the one the art world expects. He adjusted the canvas under his arm. When I chose to pursue art instead of business like my father, it created a rift that's never fully healed. And in the art world, I'm too traditional for the avant-garde crowd, too experimental for the classical institutions. The revelation shifted something in my understanding of him. Jack wasn't just the confident, free spirit I had imagined, but someone with his own struggles, his own search for belonging. How do you bear it? I asked. The uncertainty? He considered the question carefully. I remind myself that it's better to be true to who I am, even if it means standing apart, than to force myself into a role that slowly kills my spirit. He glanced at me, his expression serious. The hardest part isn't the judgment from others, Eli. It's fighting the voice inside that says you're wrong for wanting something different. His words resonated deeply, articulating the battle I'd been waging within myself since our first meeting. We reached the other side of the fair, where Jack delivered his painting to an elderly woman who received it with obvious delight. As we turned to head back, he gestured toward a quiet area behind the craft pavilion. "Can we talk? Just for a moment?" I hesitated, aware of time passing, of my family potentially wondering at my extended absence. But the need to be with him, to continue our conversation, overrode my caution. In the relative privacy of the space behind the pavilion, Jack turned to face me, his expression earnest. "I know this is complicated, Eli. I know the life you have, the expectations you carry." He took a deep breath. "But I can't stop thinking about this morning. About you." The raw honesty in his voice made my chest ache. "I can't either," I admitted quietly. "But Jack, I don't see how—" "I live about 2 hours from here," he interrupted, words coming quickly now, as if he feared losing courage. "In a small apartment above my studio. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine." His eyes held mine intently. "There's a bus that runs from the town nearest your farm. Once a week, I checked." The implication of his words took my breath away. "Are you asking me to visit you?" Jack nodded, a mixture of hope and apprehension in his expression. "Just to visit. To see a different world for a little while." He reached for my hand, holding it gently between both of his. "No pressure, no expectations. Just more time together. To figure out what this is." My mind raced with the practical obstacles, how I would explain such an absence, how I would navigate the English world of buses and cities, how I would find my way back to the farm afterward. But beneath the practical concerns lay deeper, more fundamental questions. What would it mean to take such a step? What door would it open that could never be closed again? "I don't know," I said honestly. "The fair ends today. You'll leave. I'll return to my life." "It doesn't have to be the end," Jack insisted gently. "Unless you want it to be." Did I? The question echoed in my mind as I looked at him. This man who had awakened something in me I had spent years denying, who saw me in a way no one else ever had. "I need time," I said finally. "To think, to understand what I'm feeling." Jack nodded, disappointment clear in his eyes, though he tried to hide it. "Of course. I understand." He squeezed my hand once before releasing it. "I should get back to my tent. Last day sales are usually good." I nodded, relief and regret mingling as we prepared to part ways. "I should return to my family's booth as well." We walked back toward the main area of the fair in silence, the weight of unspoken words heavy between us. When we reached the point where our paths would diverge, Jack stopped, turning to face me. "Eli," he said softly, "whatever you decide, I want you to know that meeting you has been—" He paused, searching for words. "It's been like finding a color I never knew existed, a new note in music I've been playing all my life." The poetry of his words, the sincerity behind them, made my throat tight with emotion. "For me too," I managed to say. Jack smiled, the expression tinged with sadness. "Come find me before you leave? To say goodbye, at least?" "I will," I promised. As I walked back to my family's booth, each step felt heavier than the last. How could I return to my life as if unchanged? How could I pretend that something fundamental hadn't shifted within me? The remainder of the day passed with excruciating slowness. I helped customers, wrapped purchases, made change, all with mechanical efficiency while my mind remained fixated on Jack, on his invitation, on the impossible choice before me. As the afternoon waned and the fair began its final wind-down, Father announced it was time to pack our remaining goods. The announcement sent a jolt of panic through me. Time was running out. "May I make one last walk around the fair?" I asked, striving to keep my voice casual. "To say farewell to A friend I made. Father looked surprised, but nodded his permission. Be quick. We should be home before full dark. I moved through the fairgrounds with purpose, my heart pounding against my ribs. Around me, vendors were beginning to dismantle their booths, the temporary world of the fair already dissolving back into its component parts. Jack's tent was half dismantled when I arrived, canvases carefully wrapped and stacked in wooden crates. He looked up as I approached, and the relief that washed over his face made my chest ache. I was afraid you wouldn't come, he said, setting down the canvas he had been wrapping. I said I would, I replied, our ritual exchange offering a small comfort in the face of imminent separation. Jack glanced around at the busy fairground, then gestured toward a quiet space behind his tent. Can we? I nodded, following him to the relative privacy of the space, aware of my limited time, of my family waiting. Once we were alone, Jack turned to face me, vulnerability plain in his expression. I don't want to say goodbye, he admitted softly. I don't either, I confessed, the truth of it aching in my chest. But I don't see another way. Jack took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. I meant what I said earlier, about visiting, about seeing a different world, even if just for a day. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather-bound sketchbook, worn from use. I want you to have this. I stared at the offering, understanding its significance. Jack, I can't take your sketchbook. It's my travel one, he explained, nearly full anyway. But there's a new page at the back with my address, my phone number. He pressed it into my hands. If you ever want to see the world beyond, come find me. The weight of the book in my hands felt enormous. Not just paper and leather, but possibility, choice, a door standing open before me. I don't know what to say, I whispered, my fingers curling around the precious object. You don't have to say anything now, Jack assured me. Just keep it, look through it when you're alone. Remember what we shared here. The finality in his tone made my eyes burn with unshed tears. This was goodbye then, perhaps forever. The thought was almost unbearable. Before I could stop myself, I stepped forward and kissed him, a brief, desperate press of lips that contained all the words I couldn't say. When I pulled back, his eyes were wide with surprise and something deeper, warmer. I have to go, I said, already stepping away, afraid that if I stayed another moment, I might never leave. My family is waiting. Jack nodded, understanding in his gaze. Goodbye, Eli. Whatever you decide, know that meeting you has changed me. I clutched the sketchbook to my chest, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. With a final nod, I turned and walked away. Each step a battle against the urge to turn back, to run to him, to choose a path I could barely imagine. The journey home passed in silence, the rhythmic clip-clop of the horse's hooves marking time as I sat beside my father, the sketchbook hidden inside my vest. Night had fallen by the time our buggy turned onto the familiar dirt road leading to our farm, the moon casting silver light across fields I had known all my life. After helping unload our goods, I excused myself to check on a newborn calf in the barn. There, in the privacy of the hay-scented darkness, I finally allowed myself to open Jack's sketchbook. The pages were filled with his life, quick studies of city streets and park benches, detailed portraits of strangers caught in moments of unguarded emotion, landscapes both familiar and foreign to me. Each drawing was a window into his world, into the freedom and variety of his existence compared to the constrained repetition of mine. In the final pages, I found what he had mentioned, his address written in that same expressive hand, a phone number, and beneath them, 3 simple words. Find me, Eli. I traced the letters with my fingertip, feeling the slight indentation they made in the paper. The choice before me seemed impossible. Remain in the only world I had ever known, fulfilling my duties to family and community, or step into the unknown, following this unexpected feeling to wherever it might lead. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying every moment with Jack, every word, every touch. By the time dawn broke across the horizon, I was already dressed, drawn outside by some restless energy I couldn't contain. I walked to the fence line at the edge of our property, the same meadow where Jack and I had sat just the day before. The dew sparkled on the grass, the world washed clean by night and renewed by morning. Leaning against the rickety wooden fence, I opened the sketchbook once more, turning to the final page with its simple invitation. Find me, Eli. The rising sun warmed my face as I stood there, poised between two worlds, two possible lives. Behind me lay everything I had ever known: safety, certainty, community, the love of family shaped by shared belief and tradition. Before me stretched an unknown path, frightening in its openness, exhilarating in its possibility. In my mind, I saw Jack walking away across this very meadow, his figure growing smaller with distance, but no less vibrant, no less real. The memory of his kiss lingered on my lips, the warmth of his hands on mine, the way he had seen me, truly seen me, for perhaps the first time in my life. I closed the sketchbook, pressing it against my heart as the day brightened around me. Full of possibility, heavy with choice.